Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the Bee Formless Flow Driven CEO podcast. Today, I welcome Rimma Boshernitsan. I just actually asked you how to pronounce your surname and then I got stuck there, Rimma.
No, it's good. Do you want to
How
say it
are
again?
you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Based in New York, currently downtown. Is that right?
San Francisco.
Oh, San Francisco. Why did I say New York? I need to wake up. You did say San Francisco, and I'm like saying New York.
Maybe it's my black jacket that's giving, the New York vibes or
Yeah.
something.
You're also traveling to New York, so you know, I think you said to me. Is
I
that
was just there last week and I'm going to be back there in 2 weeks.
that's right? Okay, so I did have New York on my mind.
Yes.
I'm pretty excited to speak to you today because we've got lots to talk about, and you're doing some pretty incredible stuff in the world. Uh, and they're the founder and CEO of Dialogue, which is what I understand an interdisciplinary strategic advisory firm based in San Francisco, even though I said New
Yeah.
York. But you've got like 20 years of experience. You've been a strategic advisor to CEOs, emerging businesses, Fortune 500 companies, Apple, Aesop, Levi's, Lyot, Kraft Foods, Chevron. And you also began your career at Deloitte. So pretty
Mhm.
impressive caliber of brands, businesses.
Mhm.
Tell us about your career and how it started and how you ended up founding and becoming CEO of Dialogue.
A great long question. I have a long answer for this. I um I think I didn't realize when I was a kid just how curious I really was. And so it took me quite a few years to give myself this time and space to actually embrace the curiosity that lives within me. And I say this because I very consciously chose when I was an undergrad to study economics and art history. And it was a very deliberate decision. It was, I knew I was very interested in how things worked in terms of the world and economics and trade and like commerce. And then I was also like very much inspired culturally and really wanted to understand like to know things about within culture that I like felt like every intelligent person should know. And
Yeah.
so combining these two things was very natural for me. Like I never thought that like I should choose one or the other. And in fact, I had like even a third major that was more focused on like Slavic studies, which I just wanted because I wanted to read more Russian books. And I felt like this will make me read if I take some of these courses. But the way that I got to starting dialogue was really like backwards. I frankly pushed myself into finance because I thought, well, I have an economics degree. I need to do something with this. And realized that finance was totally not my thing.
Mm.
It was very much a numbers game and very much me sitting in a conference room in front of a Excel spreadsheet. Very little communication with people and very much a lot of communication with like programming Excel. And I thought to myself, I was like, how is it possible that 90% of my time I'm doing this, and then 10% of my time I get to spend with family and enjoying the cultural thing that I studied in college. So that was like the first inkling, like 3 years into working at Deloitte, I was like, I don't know if I like this anymore. But I wasn't sure, like I wasn't ready to leave the firm, but I was definitely ready to leave finance. And so luckily the firm was very much about keeping people within, like not from leaving. And I talked to some people and they were like, you should probably go into consulting. It sounds like you're really interested in psychology. You're really interested in how like strategy works. And so I went down the rabbit hole of exploring consulting. I'm like, what does that mean? How does it work? And what I loved about it was you got to be in the trenches with your clients, working with people, which is something
Solving
I didn't really
problems.
get to do as much of in finance. I mean, you work with people, but it's the same people at Deloitte
Mm.
versus here. I got to leave Deloitte and go out into the world, and then came back to Deloitte. And so consulting was really formative. I worked in M&A. I did a lot of post-merger integration work, very much like psychology of organization, psychology of transitions, organizational effectiveness, change strategy. It was really interesting. And it was also really, really taxing on health. Like you just working 24 hours a day. You have your BlackBerry, you're a slave to your BlackBerry. It's the traditional kind of, you're working at the investment banking hours, but you're not actually getting paid at that level.
Yeah.
And so when you realize what you're sacrificing, which is again, I was already feeling like an ant in an ant farm, then doing more of that and putting more of myself into something that I felt like was interesting enough, but is this really what I need to be doing with my life? Made me question, like, so 5 years into it, I got burnt out. I was exhausted. I was living in London and Paris. I was going to Moscow every week, and for work and not for fun. And realizing that, like, actually what I really should be doing is probably refocusing on the things that inspire me. And this was right around the time where, like, the movement of, like, be yourself at work, bring your whole self to work was like a thing, right? And I was like, well, I'm bringing none of myself to work. I'm bringing a self to work that is expected, but not, it felt contrived in some ways and inauthentic. And so in 2008, a week before Lehman collapsed, I left the firm. I went on sabbatical and traveled in Eastern Europe with my friend. And then I came back and started working in corporate, kind of decided, like, I'm like, I'll give it one more shot and see, will I like working in-house more than I liked working in a consulting firm? And frankly, at the time, this is when Gen Zs were just, when millennials were still entering the workforce. Like, there was like there's the geriatric ones like myself, and then there's the younger ones that were entering the workforce. And so this organization that I worked for wanted to know, how do we recruit more millennials and how do we make them happy so they stay working for us? Because at this point, the baby boomers were already retiring early and on time. And this, so I was involved in, like, shepherding this, like, movement of, like, how do you create a sticky workplace in a positive way, right? Like, with people who are used to a different way of working and a different way of being. And then through that process, realizing I'm actually not happy working into a 9 to 5 at all, even though I loved that I had my gym schedule and I loved that I had, like, all the things I could not predict, like, when I was at Deloitte. I was like, this is insane. Like, I'm literally, like, compartmentalizing my life. I'm, like, doing this 9 to 5 and I'm doing that 9 to or 5 to 10 or whatever. And the 5 to 10 again seemed so small to me. I'm like, where's my life? Like, what am I living into? And again, it's like such an existential question in your 20s. Then you realize I'm now in my 40s. I'm like, it still exists. It doesn't really matter. But
I agree.
What it forced me to do, right? Yeah. What it forced me to do was really assess, like, what is it that fuels me? And where are my interests? And so I actually left the corporate world to go into the arts, to become an art advisor, which is a person that helps individuals and their families acquire strategically art as an asset class, but at the same time also build beautiful art collections that they may enjoy for centuries, generations, or whatnot. So I did that for 3.5 years and worked with some phenomenal clients in Europe, and loved it. Like, I really loved it, but I realized again, like, I'm in some way, shape, or form, I'm a slave to like someone else's timeline. And it was never about what I'm wanting to do in the moment of what it's always like I'm accountable to someone else about something, even if though I'm running my own thing. Because when you're working with wealthy people that have expectations, you're working for them, right? You're not working with them necessarily. Not always, it depends on the client. And so I felt like, after assessing, like, 3 years into it, I was like, I feel like I'm giving up my seat at the table. Like, I felt like the work was stimulating in that I loved my conversations with artists. That was really pushing my boundaries of my thinking and what I'm able to contribute, and kind of how I saw interdisciplinary, like, ideas and themes come together. But working with my clients was the same thing as working with clients at Deloitte. Like, you still have deliverables, you still have expectations, you still have to be in meetings, and now you're working for wealthy people. So, like, the socioeconomic divide is felt, especially in the US. It's very specific, but you can tell there's a language, that you need to speak to be able to meet people where they're at. And if you don't speak that language, then they are working for them versus with them. And so I learned that very quickly. And being in, coming out of I moved to the US as an immigrant from the former Soviet Union when I was 8 years old. So for me, it's not like I came here with a trust fund. And I'm not going to have a trust fund. And that was that was my reality. So I was looking back at, like, everything, and I kind of stepped away for a month or so and took some time. And I realized that if my most interesting conversations are with artists, and I have this really great network in the business world and now in the art world, what would happen if I brought those two things together and created a true interdisciplinary practice, which is what dialogue became. We started experimenting around looking, well, business people are calling what artists are doing innovation, but like 20 years later or 15 years later, then if we brought those same artists into the proverbial boardroom to help make certain decisions, or help shepherd strategy, or at least impart some wisdom or information on people that are making very important decisions, might we be able to change something? And that is effectively where the company started in 2015, and how we've like now just progressing into it. And finally, I think the world is ready for interdisciplinary. When I started doing it, it was like, oh, you're design thinking. I'm like, absolutely not. There is zero design. I do not believe in design thinking. It doesn't work. It's not creative. It's a process. We don't do process. We're all about natural systems and organic flow, and within a specific container. So it's been a very interesting journey. So that's how long-winded answer, but how I got to starting dialogue.
Journey. But what a journey. But like, I feel like you from a very early age were like, it was your soul. It was your soul saying to you, my soul
Yeah.
is, sounds like you were soulless or feeling soulless. And you were like, you had a calling, and it was like, what, nothing is filling me. I love your, I guess your notion on that 9 to 5 and then that 5 to 10. And that whole like that it's that kind of almost like for me that cut between. That's why I don't like the term, and I'd love your thoughts on this. Work-life balance, because
Oh,
it's not a balance, and you explained it in such a way where it's like I was doing 9 to 5, and then I had this 5 to 10. That's not balance, and yet we still talk about a lot
no.
of time around this balance where it's you have work and then you have life. Whereas for me, it's integrate like it's like a life work flow. It integrates, right? Like and
Yeah.
you sounds like you were looking for that flexibility and freedom. And even like we were just talking before, having your own business, you do get that flexibility and freedom. You get to pick your
Yeah.
kid up from school, for example, like, but you're still
Yeah.
working. But do you know what I mean? So yeah,
Yeah.
it feels like you had this very early age, this soul calling, and it was almost like you were shaping and reshaping where you were, how it was all going to come together, and then comes dialogue. How did you come up with the name dialogue?
I honestly, I think there was a conversation I had with a friend of mine where I think we were talking about a show that existed on NPR, maybe, where it was like a Alice Waters interviewing someone outside the food industry that she's obsessed with or something. Like, can't remember. There was a show of this nature, and we were talking with this friend of mine, and I'm like, yeah, that's exactly it. Like, I want to create dialogue. I want to create more for people to like intersect in these various different ways. And that's, I think, out of that conversation, I had this friend's sister do the initial brand design for the company, not the one that's current, but a previous or iteration of it, and it just kind of felt right. Like, because I thought whatever I'm doing is going to be in dialogue. It's going to be in some sort of weaving, right? And the dialogue doesn't have to be verbal. It can be nonverbal. It could be completely, implicit, subconscious. But there's clearly something happening. And so, and I always saw the way that we work and the way that I like to work as like coming in as an undercurrent, and sort of pushing and pulling and weaving and make and like helping navigate and like bridge ideas. And to me, when you talk about bridging and you're talking about like, kind of integration, it's very much about dialogue. And I even like thought about it. What's the difference between a dialogue and a conversation? Is there a difference? And it's I somehow something about the verb, the verb and the word. There's an embodied tone to it, and I think over the years, I don't think I didn't start this way, but I think now that I'm here, the embodiment of what it is that is a practice of dialogue is very important to how the work gets done, and is very much rooted in my current, like in my belief system that's like emerging and emergent and emerging
Yeah, I
as
love
the
that.
company is being built.
You've got a quote on your website, and I'm going to read it out. When we engage in dialogue across different meaningful transformations of business culture and the self are possible. And so, talk to us a little bit about that. The meaningful transformation, the merging of business culture and self, and the self are possible.
Yeah. This sort of goes back to like the bring your full self to whatever you're doing. Like, I just feel like we as a species are naturally in a system that is integrated, and we are part of it. And if we disengage from that system, then we become disengaged. and I think that as we integrate collectively, as I do think that there's a large part of dialogue that's so much about the collective and the collective meaning making, collective intelligence, the collective at large. And I think to be part of a collective, you have to bridge across many things. Like difference is one of those things, but also, there's a beauty in coming together, and there's a beauty in seeing difference and acknowledging and naming that difference and exploring the difference and exploring the thing that triggers us to not want to face the difference. And I think that's part of weaving dialogue and kind of creating conversations that are of the moment and for the moment. And that's probably where that phrase is like probably a decade old, like what you read, but it's still so true. And initially, I would say that like how I thought about it was right now it's very much like from an ecosystem standpoint, but when I wrote it, it was very much about, if you have to work on yourself so that you show up in a way that you're going to meet others where they're at, whether it's at the same place as you are or otherwise, so that you can actually connect into what they're feeling or doing to then make the difference that you want to make together, again, in the form of a collective. And now I still believe in everything I just said. I think I'm approaching it more as like, we are in constant, we're constantly oscillating with one another within our ecosystem. And it's very much like we are of it and it is of us. And so it's up to us to bring that full self to the thing that we are engaging with, whether it's a relationship or a set of relationships or a belief system or an operating model, whatever, right? You can make it as tactical or as woo as we want. But I think the transformation happens when all of those things come into place. And a lot of the work eventually ends up being in this moment of like, there's a decision that needs to be made. For that decision to be made, a transformation has to happen because a belief system has to change, a behavior has to change, a relationship has to change, a way of engaging has to change. And so part of my work is actually, as much as it is around being a futurist and looking at the context of what we're going into, it is also about looking at the now and helping the individual or the collective of individuals move past themselves to achieve the thing that we might be able to, that we're going towards. So, hopefully that answers it.
I love that because it's a constant dialogue, isn't it? Like that's what you kind of it's saying. And as a collective, we're always in dialogue, and so and it doesn't, like you say, it doesn't always have to be verbal. In terms of the sorts of projects that you're working on, and the teams that you put around it, do you have like a collective of different people that you bring in, or does it depend on the project and depend on then who you bring into the dialogue, so to speak? Like how do you approach that?
No, totally. So we started off having a set like a small 5-person team, and I realized over the span of the past like 7 years, maybe even 5 years into that, I realized I'm like, no one project is the same. So what I'm having to constantly do is like pull 2 people that are perfect for a project, staff them, and then the other 2 are kind of chilling. And I'm like, well, it doesn't make sense to just let them, because they should be involved in the project anyway, because we're all doing it together. But then economically, it doesn't make sense, right? The numbers just don't work. So I decided like about 3 years ago to only staff when we have projects. So we have a set, like we have 3 people that work with me, and they are not on client work. And then we've got the folks that are client facing are like on a bench and like in my network. And I pull the right people together when we have the specific project. Because literally we do research, we can do a one-on-one advisory, we do facilitated sessions, we do different like think tanky type things. And for each of those different like products, you need a different skill set. Somehow I've managed to create work for myself that like fits within all of my skill sets, but I don't want to do all the work. I prefer to work with people who can help, we can work together, so I can do my brilliant stuff, which is not always all of the stuff. Like I don't like managing clients, for example. I would prefer someone else do that. but I love being creative, like, and meeting with clients and just, helping them think.
Yeah.
So
Coming up with the
yeah,
ideas.
yeah, and cutting, and I think also, like, as a owner of a small business, I feel like you have to be very, very focused, and at the same time, just like there's no emotions, like in the sense of there's emotions, of course, we're human, but like when you look at a P&L, like it just has to work, right? There's not a lot of room for it not to work. And so then you have to say, okay, I love working with you, and I can only staff you on these projects when they come. And sometimes you have great staff, and sometimes you have staff that are great that then are always busy, and you can never get them back again. And that's just sort of, you always have to have your tentacles in different places so you can staff the right thing. But
Definitely.
that's definitely like not super a big problem for me. I think it's more working on inspired work sometimes is harder to get. Those types of the kind of projects I love to work on are not always available. They're not always is every leader open to doing something extraordinary, right?
Yes.
They might just need something mundane, and I don't love the mundane, so then I try to staff out the mundane, but then do the sexy work.
Yeah.
But as you know, it's not sexy work is
Yeah.
also not always, it's not common.
No,
Yeah.
I was going to ask you that as a futurist, you must come across like some really, and I'm keen to understand like, what your kind of what sort of trends you're seeing, etc. But also, do you get like do you find sometimes that you might have, like, as a futurist or, like a big ideas person, strategic, thinker, do you get at times like not shut down, but get the resistance, or that's too out there, or like, no, we need to come back here and stick to the status quo? Do you ever find those challenges, and then how do you respond to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now what I'm noticing is people are super open. They're very open because there's so much they don't understand. And so any clarity I can provide around the technology, the trends and like AI, like where we're seeing the convergence of human and AI really be happening, not out of fear, but out of actual like where the technology really is. I think they're very grateful. What I'm noticing is there's been I presented to a group of German entrepreneurs a year, no, maybe less than a year ago, like maybe 8 months ago. And was interesting. There's there's a curiosity and a hubris that I noticed, in that like they think they know because they invest in technology, but then you push their boundaries on what's possible, and they're kind of taken aback by the fact that you're pushing them, but they should know this, but they don't know it. And so there's like this ego conflict. And it was really interesting to observe because when I'm doing that for clients, they're thirsty. I feel like they're thirsty because they're like, they want to know so that they can bring it to their team or make the decision or be more informed. And so it feels right now less because of the times, because we're in Silicon Valley, because things are moving so quickly. I think they're looking for translation and language.
Mm.
And to the extent that I can provide that, they're very happy to receive it. Now, when we operationalize some of these things, the issue is less about what it is that we're operationalizing, but rather like it's in the how. Like the how makes them uncomfortable because the how makes them have to go to the board of directors to present a different strategy. The how makes them they need to go back and study a bit more and figure out how does this product relate to the thing that they just learned, and are they going to be behind when they go to market? There's still like there's like the cognitive dissonance, right? And like the small deaths, as I call them. I'm like, part of my work is literally helping people grieve the thing that they've created so that they can birth something new. Because when they find out that they're not in that they're not doing the thing, or they are doing the thing that's very exciting, and then they move forward, but there's still obstacles, that's fine. But the moment they realize that they're not on track, it's about literally like sunsetting and like death dueling, like all of this stuff that they've been working on, so that they can realize the thing that there's potential for. And so part of me is a death doula, part of me is like a possibilitarian, like where I have to like push them into hope, and then at the same time let them let go of things. And so there's a lot of like,
How do you help them with the death the death doula piece in terms of like what like do you have like tools? Like what do you do? Because that's just like the
I
hope and
mean,
then the swinging between like this that dialogue even there, and I'll bring in dialogue because it's like fascinating. Like, do you actually call it that with them, or do you like
no, no,
softly? I was gonna say like,
I don't. We don't use doula in any business word language, but I do talk about little deaths, right? I talk about like letting ourselves like let go of and creating some sort of I'm like in I would say ritual, but I don't use that word either. I might use let's just like do a plus delta analysis and then like have a process that we go through when we sunset something, right? And to me, we can do it in a connected way, and we don't have to name that we're doing some sort of like more spiritually like
yeah,
connected process. I think people need space to voice whatever it is that they're not voicing, and I think it's really as simple as that. And then everything else becomes part of like a framework that we design together that is helping them understand where they've been to then
where they're
plan where
going.
they're going. It's very, very like businessy. But the language I customize it depending on if I'm talking to an all-female team. I might use some of the words that are familiar to them, right? Because when I say the word doula to a female, it's a very different meaning than to a male or some other type of person. So I think it's just I think I've had a lot of time to reflect on what it is where I do well and where we can kind of help plug holes and where we can open up possibilities. And so I can use this language with you and you understand it, but I do think that it's still early for business to accept it, although some organizations are very much about embracing a more nat kind of language with like that is embedded in like natural systems and complexity and like that, and they're open to this emergent sort of like this dialogue, this language. But it's more, I think, for me to like know when I work with clients, I think sometimes I know what they're about to go through months before they're going to go through it. And so it's on me to be able to help them land there softly, and then because I'm the one that also is up, like pulling the rug from under them and they've hired me to do that. But then we have to land and we have to move. So I can't just leave them hanging. So it's a nice kind of balance. I don't always get to do this in like this beautiful way as I've described. Sometimes it's a mess and I come into a complete mess. And there's conflict and no future. Like I can inspire them with my future stuff, but like at the end of the day, the conflict has to be resolved. The trust has to be built, or managed rather, not
Trust.
been built. And so then, like, I also find myself like meandering and weaving and helping and mending certain things or asking the right questions so those processes can take shape on their own. So I'm sort of like because I have an organizational like effectiveness background, I think it positions me also like I struggle, like I oscillate between like getting into it too deeply with them on the inside to like helping them contextualize themselves on the outside. And in many ways, this dichotomy has existed my entire career. So I'm really comfortable like this with this like Mobius strip of like moving
Well,
through
yeah,
it.
it's non-linear. You're inside out. It's an inside out dialogue. You go deep
Mhm.
within, but then you can go deep externally. In terms of,
Mhm.
so you've said that you're noticing a lot of curiosity and openness, if you like, with regards to the state of the world we're living in right now. You also called out, trust as well, and I think trust is a big thing, and safety, if you ask me, as well, in terms of, when working
Yeah.
with people, you've got to build their trust, they've got to feel safe, etc. What are you seeing as then? um, challenges at this point in time? Like, what do you see as the biggest challenges we're facing, in business, etc.?
Oof, that's a good question. The biggest challenges in business is that we are siloing ourselves from what's happening in the like we're allowing conversations to take shape within the organization that are becoming like at a political or societal or like your the conversations that may normally not have taken place in the traditional workplace. We're allowing for those conversations somewhere in some places. But what we're not doing in business is actually integrating how business works with the natural flow of like with our biological flow, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's we were just, as I mentioned, I was just in a meeting talking a lot about like human flourishing
Yeah, I love that.
and where like the capitalist systems are like extractive versus regenerative. And I think part of where I'm sensing business isn't going is not, I mean, this is collective. I'm sure there's parts, of course, are trending towards that. Is how do we become more regenerative in our existence at large, as humans, as people in the workplace, as people, as corporations. And I think that that is the biggest thing is when we get to that place where we can figure out how we're become less extractive, then we'll be able to create new ways of being and doing and making. And I think, and that's the like sort of flourishing piece that I think we are on the cusp of like hopefully embracing and creating like operationalized processes around. But so far it's been very disconnected, very siloed from like how we live and how we work. So I think, and especially now, with COVID ending, and now all these corporations are like, you must be in the office, when most of us realize that we have actually been better not by not being in the office. I think instead of redesigning something and making it for the 21st and 22nd centuries, we are literally going back to the 20th century. And that makes no sense to me whatsoever. And everything I'm seeing right now globally, the right wing swing, right? And just the way that like people are again segregating by culture, segregating by religion, by region. It's just ridiculous. Like we are creating the silos that are creating the conflicts that are creating the extraction that then we get sick from, and then we end up trying to treat ourselves from. But in fact, our systems are not even designed to treat ourselves properly. So then we end up like dying or being really sick or not feeling like we're what do you call it?
Flourishing. We're not flourishing, basically.
Like we're not flourishing, we're not growing, we're not like filling our own buckets. And from a biological standpoint, that's a failure, right? From a physics standpoint, from like a planetary standpoint, that's a failure, because we are here to keep the planet green. And I'm not even talking about, I'm not talking about climate. Climate is like whatever at this point, like that's we've talked about it enough. We know it's an issue, but I'm saying more of like our responsibility to the larger ecosystem of the planetary is failing too. So, yeah, so that's where I see a huge problem, and it's not a siloed like little problem in business. It's a huge, like the business is affecting the rest of us, and all the ecosystems, and we haven't really been linking these ideas together well enough to be able to do anything about them. And even if we do something about them, it's like you're starting in the middle and going outwards versus going in and like fixing and starting almost like rebuilding from scratch, where we should be doing. We should be redesigning.
Yeah. So do you think, you said we're on the cusp, right? Of there's this cusp of the human flourishing, but yet we're seeing a lot of wanting to go back to the way it was, or, kind of that's that fear for me, that fear-based being attached to an outcome because we know it, right? We know how it works. Like, you talk about the office, and I agree, like, the flexibility. And I think the office has a role. It can play a role in terms of collaboration, creativity, social connection, all of that sort of stuff. But there's also this opportunity to like go back to what you were talking around earlier around this 9 to 5. Do we really have to be wedded to a 9 to 5? And for me, that all comes down to a trust piece in terms of like trusting your people to, to engage, to be productive, etc., etc. When you talk about being on the cusp, we're on the cusp of something, but yet it just sometimes feels so far away from where we need to be to almost to move fully into this new world order, because it feels like this new world order is here. AI is going nuts at the moment. There's so much happening in the world, but yet it's like, who's guiding us there? And so it's people like you. It's it's the collective that are all about, there's a different way to be, there's a different way to do. It's that regenerative. We're the ones that are going to guide the way forward. What's your view on Yeah, how far off do you really think we are though? Like in terms of from a futurist perspective, I know that's a really big question. I'm asking you to think
Yes.
of something, but I'm not asking you because I know you can't.
Yeah. I'm very impatient. So for me, we're already behind, we're so behind. Like we should have been here at least 30 years ago. But I think um, the thing about taking the long view is that time and space sort of take as long as they need to take to
Exactly.
realize something. And so I think that I actually, I'm not in the rush. Like I just feel like yes, I want to see this happen, but I think it's going to take more than what we're doing right now. And I think it's going to take the right people to be at the helm of what needs to happen. And so until that happens, until the right people are called and step into those roles, we're just going to have to wait. And I don't know how long that's going to be, but I think that this is like a generational thing. It's not, it's like a generation of waiting, not like a year or 3 years. I think it's really like decade plus. And I mean, ideally it happens faster, but I just don't see it because right now we've regressed like significantly backward. And so I think what's going to happen then is like regress and then move forward. You know, I think hopefully catapult, like kind of always happens in history. I feel like you go,
Yeah,
it's like a boomerang in a way, and like you have to go backwards and push yourself up. So I don't know in terms of number of years, but I will say that I think like I'm thinking about it in a long view perspective, and I'm hoping that it's within the next 100 years that could shift. But hopefully in the next decade, like we see at least the positive movement. I mean, I'm already seeing movement. I'm already meeting with different people that are
mm,
really pushing things forward. Investors that are doing like good, only investing in things that are like made with love, literally where love is at the center of the mission statement.
yeah.
Only investing in regenerative. So like there is movement. It's just that for it to build, for all these systems to kind of connect and then create the movement, it just takes time for them to organize. And I think
Mm.
from a complexity standpoint, it's already all happening. We just have to let
It
it move.
happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. It goes back to that organic, natural flow, right? Exactly what you're talking about. I know
Yeah.
that I'm conscious of your time. What is probably, so just on that, we've just had that. What is then your biggest hope for the world right now, knowing that we're, quite some time off and we've just got to allow but we can still make a difference whilst in the meantime and to be,
Mhm.
yeah, what is your biggest hope for the world?
I would say that the world needs more dialogue. I know that sounds corny,
No, I
and
love
it's
that.
totally not to do with anything like my business, but I really do think that if we had more like more like intention behind the way that we hold space together, none of this shit would be happening. Like we would not have men at the helm of like these countries in an era of the feminine. I mean, this is like we're in an Aquarian era. This is the feminine era, right? And we have men leading all these initiatives that are like ruining the world in many ways. Some of them are good, some of them are really bad. So I think that we just need more space, more time and space to hold for one another in dialogue, and then hopefully we could see each other's like humanity, and then like
Mm,
allow that to shape our decisions versus bottom line or
agree.
wars or whatever else. It just all comes out of so much negative, um like not even negative, it's ego. It's just 100% ego, and that is a scary place to be. For me, when I operate out of my ego, I make dumb decisions. So I
So
imagine that like it's the same for what's happening now. Yeah.
yeah. And I like to call that male female energy flow. And that we need to weave that into the dialogue more because when it's just
Mhm.
purely male energy or real ego driven, and I'm not suggesting all
Yeah.
males, there's a lot of females, we all have an ego at the end of the day. But we need that weave. We need that constant, like that female, the intuition, the wisdom. We need to make decisions. We need the male energy to come in as well, women, but like we need the mix. And so that for me is probably the biggest thing that we need to be bringing more of versus just this, you have to do it this way sort of thing. Rima, thank you so much.
Thank you.
How do we find out more about dialogue and what you're doing in this world?
There's the website, in-dialogue.co. I have a weekly newsletter that I write on Sunday mornings, and it gets sent out on Sunday afternoon Pacific Standard Time. So it would be your Monday, I guess, right? You're in the future, so your Monday.
Yeah.
And the newsletter sign up is on my website as well.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that's the best way to stay in touch.
Cool. Excellent. Yeah, I forgot that we spoke about you're in the almost like I'm in the future, you're in the
Yes.
past, but we're right now
Yeah,
in the present.
I love that.
I do too, because we're right present right now. And I hadn't
Mhm.
thought about you can be anywhere in the world, but and there's a time difference, but when you're actually together, you're fully present. So I love ending on that as well. So thank you, Rimma, for
Yeah,
a
thank
great
you.
chat and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.